Hello, everyone, and welcome to my session, Intro to Launch Daemons. My name is Rebecca Latimer, and I work for the Hibbing Public School District in northern Minnesota. If you don't know where Hibbing, Minnesota is, don't worry, most people don't. I'm way up in the north on the Iron Range where it gets really cold. So this session is called Intro to Launch Daemons. And during this presentation, we're going to go over just kind of how I got started with this topic, kind of my story, what a launch daemon actually is. We're going to break one open and look at the anatomy and see what's actually inside. We're going to go through the process to creating one if you wanted to set up your own. I'm actually going to walk you through how I create one, and then I have some more resources at the very end for if you want to keep going with this topic. This is just intro to launch daemons. This is not in-depth in launch daemons. So my story, I'm going to start off with just a little disclaimer / introduction. I'm not a developer. I can't stress this enough. I'm a tech working at a public school district. My days don't consist of writing code all day, every day. Sometimes I wish that they did, but working here, we kind of have to do everything here. So when I get a chance to automate something, it's kind of a little treat, but I could be interrupted at any time by a kindergarten student walking into my office with a broken iPad, or a phone call from a parent that wants to view their student's grades. I may get a panicked request to turn on the guest Wi-Fi last minute in the special ed room, or a flood of tickets saying that Adobe applications aren't working in one of the labs. And two of those things actually happened to me today. So launch daemons are kind of something that I got started with on accident. So I had written some really cool scripts to automate some things, and I wanted to kind of make those go on their own and go on a schedule instead of me having to manually trigger them. I kind of reached out to the community, and the answer that I got was write a launch daemon. Just write a launch daemon, right? I found it kind of intimidating, the prospect of doing this. I was a little bit nervous about it. I was a little bit scared. But it really surprised me when I actually started doing this and figuring it out on my own, how easy they actually are. You'll see later in the demo that I do, we'll create one in about 7 minutes. So even though you might find them scary or intimidating right now, I promise by the end, you're going to have a better grasp on them. So what are they anyway? I think that they can be scary because of the name, daemon. Nobody wants daemons running on their computer. Daemon is a term, weirdly it comes from the thermodynamics world, but it's just a term for a computer program that runs without any user interaction at all. So without you doing anything at all, the daemon is doing something on its own. You can kind of see here the mailer daemon. This is kind of the first daemon that most of us are familiar with in the tech world. And what this is a program that just tries to deliver mail on its own. You don't tell it go out and deliver mail. It just goes ahead and it does that. And so if it fails in its job, that's when we usually get that lovely email that we get saying that the mailer daemon failed in its task. Similar to the mailer daemon, launch daemons are just programs that run on your computer without you doing anything at all. So first, a quick note on the difference between launch daemons and launch agents. Generally speaking, and I stress generally because this is not always the case, but this is intro to launch daemons. Daemons are going to run when the computer boots up, and they're going to run whether a user is logged in or not. Agents generally are going to run when someone is logged in. You can do more things with a launch agent that kind of interact with the GUI. If you want something, though, that's going to run when nobody is logged in, as long as the computer's not sleeping, it's going to run a launch daemon. So the way that both of these work, launch daemons and launch agents, is through a process called LaunchD. And LaunchD is running all the time on your computer. It's one of the first things that your computer does after it boots up, is it starts up this LaunchD process. If you open up Activity Monitor on your computer right now, you'll see LaunchD is running. It has the PID of 1, and what this does is it makes sure that your launch daemons and launch agents do what they're supposed to be doing, and that is constantly checking to make sure that your launch daemons and launch agents are running when they're supposed to. You can kind of think of it, like I said here, one launch daemon to launch all launch daemons. So daemons are in your machine right now. There are a lot of them that run on your computer all the time. And you may have heard scary things in the news. A lot of malware runs on launch daemons and launch agents, and that's true. But a lot of really legitimate software also runs this way. If you go on your computer and you type sudo launchctl list, that launchctl command, by the way, we're going to use that a couple more times in this presentation. What that is the command that lets you interface with launchd. So when you run launchctl list, that's actually going to show you everything that launchd has loaded right now. So anything that's running, sorry, not loaded, anything that's running right now. One common program that uses launch daemons that all of us should be familiar with is Jamf. So anything that is doing things on a schedule generally is going to be running through a launch daemon or a launch agent. Things like auto package, outset, things that Mac admins use. Also things like apps that are set to auto update, or any apps that are scanning your computer for files like an antivirus or backup. Most of those things are running on launch daemons. Okay, so the anatomy of a launch daemon. You can see here what one actually looks like. So in this picture, this is one of the ones that's placed on your computer by Jamf if you have the binary installed and you have a recurring check-in trigger configured. So this one right here, what this does is it's running that recurring check-in trigger every 15 minutes. If you're familiar with the Mac admin world at all, this structure right here should actually look really familiar to you. And that's because it's a plist. Launch daemons are just plists. And if you're not familiar with plists, what those are is an XML file that usually is there to set preferences. A launch daemon is a special kind of plist. It usually runs a script or a command. The one that we just looked at is running a command. A lot of times they'll also call another script. So in these next few slides, we're going to break one down. And that's that one that I just showed you, which is in library launch daemons. And it's com.jamfsoftware.task.1.plist. So we're going to go through it and show you what that XML is doing. And what it really does is tell the computer what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So the first key that we're going to look at is called the label. So the label is a required key. And all this is an identifier that tells you what this is actually meant to do. So in a lot of cases, usually the ones that I create, the label matches the file name, but as you can see here, that's not always true. The label is generally there to tell you what that launch daemon is doing. These do have to be unique. If you have two launch daemons that have the same label, only one of them is going to run. The next key we're going to look at is program arguments. Sometimes they don't have program arguments. Sometimes they have program, but we're not going to go over that right now. Again, intro to launch daemons. So you're going to see some strings here. And in a lot of cases, they only have one or two strings. Sometimes these are just really simple commands. This launch daemon is running the Jamf binary, and you actually might recognize this if you've ever done the troubleshooting step of a computer on Jamf that you want to check in. You want to manually trigger the recurring check-in for a policy or something like that. If you haven't done that, you can do that. And this is how you would do it, is you would open up terminal and you would type sudo jamf policy. So you can see here that that's exactly what this launch daemon is doing. The first string is just getting the path for the Jamf binary. You can't take shortcuts in the launch daemon. You have to actually tell it the full path of where the Jamf binary is located. And then you have policy. And then you have a couple arguments after that just tell it to do a random delay. But these two components, the program arguments and the label, are the only two things that are actually required on the launch daemon. If you just have these two elements, you can run this launch daemon. But the third one is pretty common, and I'll show you why. So the third key that we're going to look at here is actually when this launch daemon is going to start. So like I said, this is not required. If you don't include this, this launch daemon is going to attempt to run your arguments all the time. So it's just going to try to do that Jamf policy. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to succeed in running all the time, but it is going to try to. Right here, we have the start interval key. And what that means is that you're going to give it a value in seconds. And every time those seconds are up, this is going to go. So the start interval here is 900, which means 900 seconds, which translates to 15 minutes. So that's how the recurring check-in trigger works. Every 15 minutes, this is running that Jamf policy. And you can kind of think of it that way, that it's like if you were manually every 15 minutes sitting at a computer and typing this in. The launch daemon is doing that for you, and that's kind of why they're so powerful. Not all launch daemons have start interval. A lot of them actually use the calendar interval, and we're going to get into that later. So if you feel like you could create one at this point, and you totally could because they're actually really, really simple, all you really need is a text file. You can open up BBEdit, you could type all this in, and you could do it. When you're just starting out, I would use some kind of a generator. There are some ones out there that are kind of older. Launch Control is one. Lingon is one. That's kind of a classic. There is an online generator right here at this link. I use this a lot. It's really, really handy. It has just a really nice interface. And we're actually going to look at that also in my demo that I do later. So what script can you use? And like I said, that program argument, you can include a command there, or you can run an external script, not external, but well, sort of external. So it's external to the launch daemon, but it's, it's on the computer. So you're running a script that is located on the computer somewhere. So these are the requirements for the script that you use. Number one, it needs to be executable. And these limitations, honestly, you're probably used to if you've run scripts through Jamf. By executable, I just mean that you have to run that chmod plus x command on it. You're changing the permissions, you're giving it the executable bit set. It also needs to run as root, which is also something that you're probably familiar with from using Jamf. You don't want to do a lot of stuff like in the user space. You're not going to have a desktop that you can call. You want to make sure that what you're running can be run as root. And the computer also has to be able to process this script. And so what I mean by that is that it needs to be able to run the script manually. So if you are pushing out a launch daemon through Jamf onto a computer, you need to make sure that that computer would be able to run that script not in a launch daemon. So if you're using Python, if you're using Z Shell, if you're using Swift, you just have to make sure that that computer would be able to run it. So when will it run? When we start to get into this, there are generally a couple options. There are really three options, but you can combine a couple of them. So the run at load is going to run the script or command as soon as the computer boots up. You can combine the run at load with the other intervals here. But generally speaking, you can do run at load, you can do start interval, or you can do start calendar interval. So start interval is the one that we just looked at, and that's going to go every X amount of seconds, and you just put that integer value in there. Start calendar interval is really interesting. What that is going to do is run on a schedule, and we'll take a look at how that actually looks. But you can specify the date, the time, or the day of the week that you want the launch daemon to run. And if you don't specify one, it's just going to use it as a wildcard. So if I say I want to run 2:30 a.m. in February, it's going to run at 2:30 a.m. in February. If I say 2:30 a.m. and I don't indicate a month, it's going to do it every month. So this is an example of what that start calendar interval looks like. If you're familiar with cron syntax, it's really similar. If you're not, don't worry. It's pretty easy to figure out. So the hour key, for example, is going to go from 0 to 23 with midnight being 0. Weekday is a little bit confusing because 0 and 7 are both Sunday. I don't know why, but they are. And then you can do weeks, you can do months, you can do, times. You can add keys for the day of the month. Like I said, anything you don't include is just going to be a wild card. So this example that I have right here is going to run at 2:30 a.m. on Tuesday. So this is going to run every Tuesday of every month. This is just generally like a scheduling thing that you can do. So where do they live? These are the folders that they can actually be loaded from. So the system library, those first two folders there, that's where the Apple provided daemons and agents are going to go. You can't really manipulate those unless you turn off SIP, which is a really, really bad idea. So don't mess with those folders. The next two folders though, the library folders, anything that you create, anything third party is generally going to go into one of those. And what those will do is just run, well, if it's a launch daemon, it's going to run no matter who's logged in or if nobody is logged in. If it's a launch agent, it's going to run when a user is logged in, any user. That last folder, that user library launch agents, that's going to be user specific. So if you want this to run for only one user, you would put it in their folder. That's not going to run for every user. It's just going to run for the user that you've indicated. So making your launch daemon work. Now, these are the really basic steps here, and you'll see in the video it's a little bit more complex than this, but the basic steps, this is all it is. Number one, you want to create your launch daemon. And you can use a generator, you can do it by hand, whatever means you want to do. Number two, you want to make sure that you make or you copy it to the library launch daemons folder. And number three, you want to load it, because just because it's in that folder, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to run. You have to actually load it. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a video of me doing this with the script that I've created.
I'm going to do is show you the script that I have right here, and this is just a really simple script. What this actually does is just checks for the existence of a file named new file, and if it's not there, it creates it, and then it echoes what it's done. This could be a really useful script if you're using extension attributes in Jamf, because you could check for the existence of this file and take some action based on whether or not it's there. You could put computers into a smart group. You could do something like that. So this is my script. I've saved this in the user local folder, and I've done that because I'm going to be using a launch daemon, and the launch daemon runs as root. So this is a folder that's accessible by root, and this is just a nice place to put scripts generally. So now that I've created my script, what I want to do is make sure that the permissions are set on it correctly. And by that, I mainly mean that it needs to be executable. So what we'll do is I'm going to open up terminal, and I'm just going to do chmod plus x, and I'm just going to drag this file name into there. And we can check to make sure that that worked. I'm going to change directory, and we're going to do lsal. And so you can see right here that this script was created and it has the executable bit set. So we've got the script ready. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and create our launch daemon. Now I've got that generator open right here that I showed you earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a good name, and I'm just going to call it create file. And the script that it's going to be running, I'm just going to go ahead and drag this in there because that'll give us the correct path. For the start interval, I'm going to do 10 seconds, and I'm just going to do that because I'm doing this presentation and I want to make sure that it's going to actually take effect. For user and group, we can ignore these. I'm actually also going to ignore all these other schedule ones. And remember, like I said, that'll treat these like a wildcard. So what that means is that this is going to run every minute, every hour, every day, every month. Working directory and root directory, we're not going to worry about those right now. This one you actually really want to set. So the standard out and the standard error path. When you are running this, you're not going to get any feedback about what it's doing. So if you took that script and you just ran it in terminal, those echoes that you have in your script are going to show up in standard out. Since this is running as a launch daemon, you're not going to see this in standard out. So what you want to do is actually put something here, and I'm going to do var/log/newfile.log. And what that's going to do is create a log file for anything that you would normally see in standard out. And I'm going to do the same thing over here with this standard error. I'm going to go _ERR. So what that'll do is if there are any errors or any output, like any of those echoes that I had in my script, those are going to go to those locations. And if those don't exist, that's fine. It'll create those. So I'm going to say create plist. So you can see here that this looks really similar to that one that we looked at before. There are instructions on this site saying to curl this and go ahead and load it. I do not recommend doing this. This is not a good idea. You don't want to just curl something from a random website and load it. What you actually want to do is just go ahead and copy this and put it into BBEdit. So I'm going to create a new text document and I will paste this here. And you can kind of check this over. The generator generally does a good job, but you definitely want to look and make sure that this is doing everything that you wanted it to do. So I'm going to save this and I will call it launched.createFile.plist, because remember, these are plists. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this to my desktop. Okay, so now we've got it on the desktop. What I'm going to do here is go ahead and go back into terminal. And what we want to do is actually copy that folder into the library launch daemons. And the terminal for that is going to be, and I do a lot of dragging in here just to make sure I don't make a typo, and the launch daemons folder. This is that library launch daemons. And enter my sudo password. Okay, so now we can see that it exists right there. So if we also go to this folder, we do an LSAL, we'll see that now it's owned by root and it's owned by wheel. So just because the file is there, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to run. We have to do that other step of actually loading it. So I'm going to go sudo launchctl load -w, and that just makes sure that it's not disabled. And I'm going to drag this in there. Oops. Okay, so now that it's there, we can do we're going to do a list, and we're actually going to grep for new file. And it didn't work. Create file. Okay, so we can see that it worked there. Okay, so now what we can do is we can go to that local folder and we can see that it already has created that new file. And what we can do is also go and we can look into var logs, log. And we can see that we have a new file ERR log and a new file log that were created. So what we can do is open this up. And we can see that it created it, and every 10 seconds it's telling me that it already exists. So if we look back at our script, this is exactly what we wanted it to do.
So as you can see, that was pretty easy. That only took about 7 minutes from start to finish. And that's starting with a script and changing the permissions on the script and loading the launch statement and doing everything that we wanted it to do. So when you think about it, you could do this with just about any script that you wanted to. Some uses that I've done with this: you can push this out with Jamf. And I have some resources in the next slide that'll kind of show you, if you actually want to push this out with Jamf, some ways that you could do that. You'd want to package it up, but you could put this on lab computers and delete user accounts that are no longer in use. You could push this out and make sure that old files that are in the downloads are moved to the trash after 30 days. If you have anything like that, if you have any script, you could do this. You could really, do anything that you felt like. It's a really, really powerful tool. And once you've learned how to use it, you can move on and you can do all kinds of other cool things. All I've shown you in this, because its intro, is like scheduling and intervals, but you can actually set up launch daemons that listen for different things. So you can have something that is watching to see if Ethernet is plugged in and turns off the Wi-Fi. Launch daemons are really powerful. So hopefully now you kind of feel a little bit more empowered and you feel better about creating one. So if you have it and you have it loaded and it's supposed to be doing what it's doing and it's not, here's just a couple of troubleshooting steps. The first thing you're going to want to do is check those logs. Make sure that you've set up your standard out and standard error. Check those logs, see what could be going wrong. Number 2, check the permissions. You want to make sure that script is executable. You want to make sure that nothing weird happened where the launch daemon isn't owned by root or something like that. Check your interval syntax. Those can be kind of tricky sometimes. Sometimes they start in 0, sometimes they start in 1. Just make sure that you check that. Consider taking it out and see if it runs without any of that. And then the last thing you want to do is check that label. I know I personally have made the mistake of copying a launch daemon from one to another one, and I've accidentally left that label in. Can't do that. Only one will run. There can be only one. So those are just some good troubleshooting steps that you can do. So more resources. Yes, you can scan this QR code. You can go to my website. I have a whole page set up with more resources, going over kind of what I did in that video. I know I moved kind of quickly. This is a 30-minute presentation, but there's more information on all of those steps that I did and why I did them and what they're actually doing. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. I'm Ginger Scripting on Twitter. I'm on Slack, Rebel ATI. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Launch daemons are really, really cool, and hopefully you feel kind of better about using them after watching this presentation. So thank you, and have a great rest of your JNUC.